All right, welcome everyone. Today we're diving deep into something that's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump, back in the White House, round two, and what it could mean, especially for a place like the Philippines.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Huge. We've got this article fresh off the press from the Philippines Daily Tribune, came out just days after the election. They're already looking ahead, trying to figure out what this means for
And
them.
it's a smart move because, what happens in Washington, well, doesn't stay in Washington. It has ripple effects everywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
And for a country like the Philippines, with its history with the U.S., its economy tied in, and millions of Filipinos living in America, well, this election hits close to home.
For sure.
So let's unpack this. Trump's win, I mean, wow. Talk about a political earthquake.
Yeah, nobody saw this coming. After 4 years out, he pulls off a comeback. It's unheard of. And I think even Vice President Harris in her concession speech kind of admitted this changes things globally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it throws a whole bunch of questions up in the air, especially for the Asia-Pacific
Right.
region. And for the Philippines especially, it's a lot to process.
Right, because their relationship with the U.S. is so complicated. It's historical, it's economic, it's personal, with so many families having ties to both countries.
It's everything.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin to untangle this?
Well, trade's got to be the first stop, right? Trump's America First policy, it's back. And that has huge consequences for how the U.S. does business, especially with the Asian economy.
Right, and let's not forget what happened during his first term. He pulled the U.S. out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Mm-hmm.
That sent a clear message.
Oh, yeah, a huge signal. So now with him at the helm again, those trade deals the Philippines has with the U.S., they're all up for grabs.
So renegotiations are basically guaranteed, right? But what does that even mean? Could this actually be good for the Philippines?
Well, it's not so straightforward. Some Filipino industries might actually come out ahead, with new bilateral deals. But then you look at the big picture. The Philippines' electronics manufacturing sector, which is booming, by the way, relies heavily on exports to the U.S.
Right.
If Trump slaps on higher tariffs, we're talking potential job losses, slower economic growth. It's a risky situation.
Definitely. So it sounds like the Philippines can't just wait and see what Trump does. They got to get ahead of this.
Exactly. And the article hints at that. Diversifying, that's the key. Don't put all your eggs in the U.S. basket.
Right. Makes sense.
Look to strengthen ties with, say, Japan and South Korea. Both are tech powerhouses, eager to invest in the region, and get this, they're both worried about China's growing influence, which of course is a big concern for the Philippines too.
Yeah, it's all connected. Speaking of China, let's talk defense. Specifically, the South China Sea, which is, well, a bit of a powder keg, to say the least.
Oh, for sure.
Now, during Trump's first term, he took a pretty hard line against China, which, frankly, a lot of Filipino policymakers liked. They're worried about China's expansionism, so that tough stance resonated.
It did. And you can't separate that from those defense agreements already in place. The Visiting Forces Agreement, the VFA, which allows for those joint military exercises, and then the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, the EDCA, which lets the U.S. station troops and equipment right there in the Philippines.
Right, it's all about deterring China. So, with Trump back in charge, do those agreements get even stronger? More U.S. troops on the ground?
Well, maybe. But you got to remember, Trump's a bit unpredictable. He wants to flex American muscle, Project Strength.
Yeah.
But he also hates getting bogged down in expensive overseas commitments.
Right.
So while he might be inclined to beef up the U.S. presence as a way to counter China, I bet he'll also expect the Philippines to pony up, contribute more financially.
So it's not just about boots on the ground, it's about who pays for those boots.
Exactly.
What's the play for the Philippines then? Do they just cough up the cash?
Well, it depends. It's all about leverage, right? They could try to use their location. They're strategically vital, right on China's doorstep. They can emphasize their willingness to host U.S. forces, to be that key ally. Maybe even link any increased financial contributions to getting something in return from the U.S.
Like what? What could they ask for?
Oh, lots of things. More advanced weaponry, technology transfer, maybe even a more active U.S. role in mediating those South China Sea disputes. It becomes a high-stakes negotiation where they got to weigh their security needs against, what they can actually afford.
And let's not forget, all of this is happening while over 4 million Filipinos are living in the U.S., many worried about what Trump's previous immigration policies meant for them and their families.
Absolutely. Those policies, especially the ones targeting foreign workers, really shook things up, created anxiety, especially in the Filipino-American community. And if those policies make a comeback, it's going to have a ripple effect. Think about all the Filipino nurses and healthcare professionals working in the U.S. Changes to visa rules could disrupt that whole flow of talent, hurting both the U.S. healthcare system and the Philippine economy, which relies a lot on the money those workers send back home.
Yeah, remittances are huge for them.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got potential economic trouble from protectionist trade policies, question marks around those defense agreements, and now the human cost of potentially stricter immigration rules. Is there any good news for the Philippines in all of this?
Well, maybe. It's kind of ironic, but Trump's whole focus on bilateral deals could actually open doors.
Okay.
The Philippines could try to negotiate terms that actually work for their outsourcing partnerships, maybe even lock in new investments. But it takes skillful diplomacy. They have to figure out what Trump really wants and find ways that both sides can walk away feeling like they got to win.
It's a tricky situation, no doubt. A lot of potential problems, but maybe some opportunities if the Philippines plays their cards right.
And we're back, digging deeper into what a Trump victory might mean for the Philippines.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground already, potential trade wars, those tricky defense agreements, and of course, all those immigration concerns. It's a lot for any country to handle, especially ones so closely connected to the U.S.
It really is. But let's not forget, the Philippines isn't just sitting back, waiting to see what happens. They've got their own goals, their own ways of pushing back, and honestly, a history of resilience that can't be ignored.
So true. Okay, let's play this out a bit. Let's say those trade talks we talked about actually happen. Trump's across the table. America first is his mantra. What's the best move for the Philippines?
Well, they've got to understand Trump, right? He loves to make deals, but he wants to feel like he's winning.
Makes sense.
So play up their strategic importance, right? The Philippines is a key U.S. ally right there on China's doorstep. They could also emphasize their workforce, young, skilled, ready to go, and pitch the Philippines as a perfect spot for U.S. companies who want to move out of China.
So it's about finding that common ground, showing Trump how this helps America too.
Exactly. But it's also about using what you've got, that leverage. The Philippines could say, look, we're open to keeping those outsourcing partnerships going, but we need something in return. We need access to your market, especially for our agricultural products. We need investment in our infrastructure. It's all about finding that sweet spot where both sides feel like they got a good deal.
What about defense? We talked about how Trump might push for the Philippines to pay more for that U.S. military presence. How do they handle that without, putting their security at risk?
It's tricky, for sure. They can't look weak, can't seem unwilling to contribute, especially with China watching every move. But they also can't get bullied into a deal that breaks the bank.
So what's the strategy?
Okay, imagine this. The Philippines says, we're all in on regional security, we'll increase our contributions, but we need the U.S. to step up too.
What does that look like, practically speaking?
Well, they could push for some of that high-tech military equipment, the kind of stuff that boosts their own defense capabilities and means they're not so reliant on U.S. boots on the ground. They could even ask for a stronger commitment from the U.S., something more concrete that says, we've got your back if things go south with China and the South China Sea.
So basically they're saying, if you want us to pay more, you need to show us you're really in this too.
Right. And let's not forget about a major player in this whole thing, the Filipino-American community. They've got deep connections in both countries, a lot of influence. They could be that bridge pushing for policies that work for everyone.
So they're not just observers. They're actively involved in shaping this relationship.
Absolutely. They get both cultures. They speak both languages. And this outcome, it affects them directly. They can push back against policies that hurt, highlight how much Filipinos contribute to American society, and remind both governments that this relationship is more than just money and military power.
It's about people, about shared history, about working together to build a future.
Exactly. And that's a message that needs to be heard, especially in these times when things feel so divided, so focused on transactions.
So we've looked at some potential strategies for the Philippines. But what about the bigger picture? What does a Trump win mean for the entire region?
Well, I think we'll probably see the U.S. being more forceful, more assertive in the Asia-Pacific. Trump's not a fan of those big multilateral agreements. He prefers those one-on-one deals where he feels the U.S. has more control. And this could really heat up competition with China as both countries try to grab influence and resources.
It's not just a U.S.-Philippines thing. It's like a giant game of chess with Japan, South Korea, Australia, everyone trying to figure out where they stand in this new world order.
Exactly. And for the Philippines, it means they have to walk this tightrope. keep that alliance with the U.S. strong, but also manage being right next door to China and make sure their own economic and security interests are protected. It's a balancing act with some pretty high stakes.
And all of this is playing out against the backdrop of climate change, right? The Philippines is incredibly vulnerable to rising sea levels, stronger typhoons, all of that. And Trump's, well, let's call it skepticism about climate action, that could make things a whole lot worse.
No doubt. I mean, he pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement his first time around. If he sticks to that, it'll make it so much harder to tackle climate change globally, and that leaves the Philippines to deal with the consequences.
So it's a double whammy. On one hand, you've got potential economic and security issues because of Trump's policies, and on the other hand, you've got climate change looming, this massive threat that needs global cooperation to fix. It's a lot to take on.
It is, but the Philippines has a history of facing tough times head-on. They've weathered storms, literally and figuratively. They adapt, they find creative solutions, they not only survive, but they thrive.
So even with all these challenges, there's still a sense of hope, of resilience.
Absolutely. The Philippines has this young, energetic population, a growing economy, and their location, strategically speaking, that gives them some leverage. And don't forget about that strong diaspora, especially in the U.S., who can advocate for them, build bridges between the two countries.
So what's the big takeaway here? What should our listeners be considering as we head into this new chapter in U.S.-Philippines relations?
The next few years are going to be crucial for the Philippines. They need to be smart, they need to be bold, and they need to use everything they've got, including the strength of the Filipino-American community, to navigate this new landscape. It's complex, it's uncertain, but they've got what it takes.
All right, welcome back to the show. We've been exploring some pretty heavy stuff, looking at how Trump's second term might shake things up between the U.S. and the Philippines.
Yeah, we've covered trade, defense, immigration, even touched on climate change, and we talked about how the Philippines can use its strength to deal with this new reality.
Absolutely. But I think our listeners are ready to get down to brass tacks to see what this actually looks like in real life.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get specific.
So let's say those talks about the Visiting Forces Agreement, the VFA, actually start. We know Trump drives a hard bargain. He could demand way more money from the Philippines, maybe double, even triple what they're paying now, just to keep those U.S. troops there.
Oh, yeah, he could. And that puts the Philippines in a tough spot.
Right. They depend on the U.S. for security, especially with all the tension in the South China Sea. But can they really afford to pay Trump's price? What choices do they even have?
Well, they could try to negotiate, push back a little on the amount, but Trump might not budge. He could even threaten to pull out U.S. troops completely if they don't meet his demands.
Wow, that's a dangerous game. Ditching the VFA would send a shockwave through the whole region. China would see that as weakness, might even get more aggressive in the South China Sea.
You got it. And back home, it could be a political disaster for whoever's running the Philippines. People would accuse them of putting the country at risk, so they might feel like they have to pay up, even if it means cutting back on other important things like education, healthcare, infrastructure.
Tough choices all around. Okay, let's switch gears to the economy. We talked about how Trump's America First policies could hurt those outsourcing businesses in the Philippines. Can you give us a real-world example?
Okay, picture this. You've got a big call center in Manila, thousands of Filipinos working there. They're handling customer service for some big U.S. company, a retailer, let's say. Then Trump hits U.S. companies with new tariffs, making it more expensive to outsource overseas.
So that retailer starts looking to cut costs, right? They decide to bring those jobs back to the U.S., people in Manila lose their jobs, and the whole Philippine economy takes a hit.
Exactly. And it's not just call centers. It could be software development, accounting, any area where Filipinos are doing work for U.S. companies.
But we also talked about how this could be a chance for the Philippines to branch out, find new economic partners. How would that actually work?
Well, they could go all in on attracting investment from other countries, Japan, South Korea, maybe even some European countries looking to get a foothold in Southeast Asia. They could offer tax breaks, make it easier to do business there, really make those foreign companies feel welcome.
Basically saying, hey, the U.S. might be shutting its doors, but we're open for business.
Exactly. And they could focus on building up their own industries, become less reliant on exports and create more jobs for Filipinos at home.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've looked at trade and defense, but what about the human side of this? What about those 4 million Filipinos living in the U.S.? How might their lives change?
Let's say you have this young Filipino couple. They've always dreamed of coming to America. They have family here. They've heard all about the American dream. But with Trump's stricter immigration policies, that dream starts to fade.
Yeah, so it takes longer to get visas, the rules get tougher, maybe they even have to enter a lottery with almost no chance of winning.
That's right. And for those Filipinos already here, they live with this constant fear of being deported. They're afraid to speak up, afraid to report crimes, even afraid to go to the doctor, all because they might get detained or separated from their families.
And this fear wouldn't just be for undocumented immigrants, right? Even those with legal status might feel vulnerable.
Oh, absolutely. Trump's policies could create this atmosphere of suspicion, make it hard for Filipinos to really feel like they belong in American society.
So it's not just about economics and politics. It's about real people's lives, their hopes, their dreams, their sense of home.
And that's where the Filipino-American community comes in. They can organize, they can fight for their rights, they can push back against harmful policies, and remind everyone that this relationship is built on human connections.
They can be that voice of reason, the bridge between the two countries, reminding us that we need to work together.
Exactly. And that's powerful stuff. It can shape the future of U.S.-Philippines relations, even with Trump in the White House.
It's been a fascinating deep dive, a lot to think about.
A lot of uncertainty, for sure, but the Philippines has faced tough times before.
They have.
They've adapted, they've found ways to not just survive, but to thrive. They've got the strength, the resourcefulness, and the community, both at home and here in the U.S., to handle whatever comes next.
Well said. It's been a great conversation. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.